Good morning. It's January 15th, and this is To My Liberal Friends. Well, Trump's nominee to be Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, went through his armed services hearing yesterday. It lived up to the hype, and there were plenty of fireworks. Republicans would enter into the record letters and statements of support for Hegseth, and Democrats would call his character and qualifications into question. And there are a couple of these instances I want to focus on today. Senator Tim Kaine, a Democrat from Virginia, brought up the issue of Hegseth drinking in the past. He asked if it was okay for someone to show up drunk on a job. This was in reference to anonymous sources who said that Hegseth was drunk on multiple occasions when leading a couple of veterans organizations. Senator Mark Wayne Mullins, Republican from Oklahoma, took offense at this character assassination of the candidate. And here are some of Senator Mullins' comments. Quote, "I think it's so hypocritical of senators, especially on the other side, to be talking about qualifications, and yet your qualifications aren't any better." End quote. Senator Mullins then went for the jugular. Quote, Senator Kaine, or I guess I better use a senator from Virginia, starts bringing up the fact, what if you showed up drunk to your job? Well, how many senators have showed up drunk to vote at night? Have any of you guys asked them to step down and resign from their jobs? And don't tell me you haven't seen it, because I know you have. And he further went on, quote, and then how many senators do you know have got a divorce for cheating on their wives? Did you ask them to step down? No. You guys make sure you make a big show and point out the hypocrisy because a man's made a mistake. And you want to sit there and say he's not qualified. Give me a joke. It's so ridiculous that you guys hold yourself to this high standard. You forget you got a big plank in your eye. End quote. I'm not sure what a big plank in your eye is, but it doesn't sound good. But Senator Mullins is absolutely correct, because in my years on Senate staff, we repeatedly watched members come to the floor late at night to vote on a bill, and it was obvious they were a bit under the influence. Nothing is ever said about it, but it happens, and it's not a rare event. I would even go further that multiple senators from both sides of the aisle were suffering from some form of old age dementia while in office, and yet nobody questioned their qualifications to be voting on key issues. Years ago, way back in the 1970s and early 80s, Senator Ted Stevens had a woman that worked on the floor for him as a whip. Susan was a super smart woman and tracked the legislation as it was coming up. And there were at least 5 older Republican senators that would not cast their vote until they had asked her how they should vote on the issue, much to the consternation of their own staff. Democrats then criticized Hegseth by stating he has never presided over a group of people larger than, quote, a medium-sized American company, and called him unqualified to lead the sprawling Pentagon, where he would oversee more than 3 million military and civilian personnel, the vast nuclear arsenal, and an annual budget of more than $800 billion. And yet these same Democrats unanimously confirmed Pete Buttigieg as Secretary of Transportation when all he had been was a mayor of a small town in Indiana. The issue that caught my attention the most was the discussion of women in the military, and particularly in certain jobs. I'm a veteran. I'm also the father of 4 very accomplished daughters who have postgraduate degrees and successful careers. I have taught them that growing up, they can be anything in this world they want to be, so long as they're prepared to meet the qualifications of that job. When I left active duty in 1975, I had to serve 2 years in the Army Reserve. The unit I was in was a petroleum supply unit, and that meant our mission was to set up a temporary fuel supply station where it'd be needed, presumably near the front of the battle. Vietnam had ended, and a lot of women were joining the reserves. It was an easy paycheck for 1 weekend a month. My particular unit ended up being about 50% women. For our summer training camp, we went to Fort Lee in Virginia. There we had to set up an actual fuel supply depot. We failed. We failed because most of these women, many of them weighing in at 130 pounds or less, could not lift the bladders that they were required to set up. And make no mistake, there were some men in the unit that couldn't lift them up either. But neither of them should be qualified for the job. In his testimony, Hegseth said he wanted a military built on merit. He said, you could meet the qualifications for the job, you should have the job. These Democratic senators attacked that statement, saying it meant he did not want women in the military. That's not what he said. Looking back at my reserve unit, there should have been some test for those that had to assemble those fuel bladders. If they could not lift a certain amount of weight, they should have been disqualified, male or female. My unit failed at a reserve summer camp, but what if we'd been actually deployed and could not perform this mission? Senator Mullins was not done with his criticism of the hypocrisy from the other side, and this one was very poignant. Senator Kaine brought up the fact that Hegseth had fathered a child while cheating on his then wife. It was the low point of the hearing. I wonder how Senator Kenney would have felt if he'd still been alive sitting there during the hearing. My guess is Senator Kenney would not have been talking the way he was. Well, moving forward today, the Pam Bondi hearings are also going on, along with 5 other cabinet positions. Democrats could not question Ms. Bondi's qualifications, so they repeatedly asked her hypothetical questions on how she would decide things brought to her within the department. Specifically, if she would say no to the president if he violated either the law or some ethics of the department. They kept citing examples where they felt he had done it in the past. Senator Mazie Hirono, Democrat from Hawaii, once again made a fool of herself with repeated questions in this area, and finally Ms. Bondi said, quote, "Senator, we could have discussed many of these issues if you'd met with me prior to the hearing. You were the only senator to refuse to meet with me," end quote. Now, how's that for doing your job, Senator Hirono? You place politics above everything else, and then you have the gall to ask if Ms. Bondi would act like you. Maybe Senator Kaine should have asked Senator Hirono if she was qualified, and maybe she should step down from her job. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening.